Persuasion. This word can actually be controversial. Some people think about persuasion as a very negative aspect of life. Oh, I'm manipulating their mind. I'm persuading them to do something they don't want to do. And other people understand that persuasion is actually something that you do all day long, not only in business, but in your personal life as well, constantly. And if you want to get a better idea about how you're persuading people all day long, you can check out this video here, where I explain all of that. Now, in this video, you're going to learn the top 6 skills that you need to have in order to be able to persuade somebody in any type of setting. So whether you want to learn how to be good at sales, whether you want a really concise sales or business training, whether you want to learn how to persuade your husband or wife or your kids to do anything, or you want to get your idea across to somebody if you're an entrepreneur, this is the video for you. So let's get into the 6 top skills that you need for persuasion. Skill number 1, you should have, or you should try to have, introverted qualities. Now, I have a whole video on introverts and why being an introvert is actually to your advantage if you're trying to persuade somebody or sell something. But to summarize, an introvert is somebody that has a characteristic of thinking internally. So how that will translate in a conversation is that introverts tend to be a bit more quiet. Now, why is introverted qualities important in persuasion? It's because of this. When you're trying to convince somebody of anything, you've heard the saying, people don't want to be sold, they want to buy, right? So this applies also when you're just trying to convince somebody of your idea. It doesn't have to be that they're buying a product or a service. It can be as simple as an idea. And on a very simple level, what this means is that people don't want you to push your idea onto them. Rather, they want to have it be their own idea, or at the very least, they want to think that it's their idea. So the better that you can actually do this, the higher chance that you're going to convince them of your idea or get that sale. Now, if you are already introverted by nature, then this is going to be a bit easier for you. Because most people think that when you're trying to convince somebody of something, you have to really talk them to death. And sometimes, only sometimes, that actually does work if you have something that people really, really want. But if you're pushing something, or if you're trying to get an idea across that is your own idea, or it's something, let's say a product or service that's unknown in the marketplace, being extremely talkative is going to work against you most of the time. And so if you can start acting like an introvert, if you're not already, your life is going to be a lot easier and you're going to get what you want a lot more. So all you have to do if you're not already an introvert is very simply speak less. And that brings me to point number 2, which is what you want to do is you want to ask smart, open questions. Now, you've probably heard of, ask open-ended questions. And I actually have a video on that as well, which you can check out here and in the description. So open-ended questions allow the other person to speak freely, right? They're questions that start with words like how, when, if. Now I take it a step further and I ask smart, open-ended questions. So the smart aspect of it means you want to make sure the questions that you're asking are leading to a place that you want that person to go. So as a quick example, let's say I work for a bank and I want to get somebody to apply for a mortgage or a credit card. The question I don't want to ask them is, oh, don't you want to apply for a credit card today? Because I'm leading them, I'm actually preparing them and encouraging them to say no, because I started with a negative. Don't you want to? Of course not. It's so easy. So instead, a smart open question would be something like, what type of purchases do you plan on making in the next 3 or 4 months? Because right there, I'm going to find out a lot of information that's going to qualify them for the credit card that I want them to apply for. Or maybe they tell me they're going to buy a house or they want to buy a house. Then I know they're a good fit for one of our mortgages. And I've asked them in an open way because I started the question with the word what. What type of purchases? So they might give me a lot of information, as opposed to if I started with a closed, strict question like, don't you want to? Not only is it a yes or no question, it's also leading them to a negative place. So ask smart, open questions. Skill number 3, first impressions must be spectacular. I have a full course on first impressions, which I highly recommend that you go through, and you can get a free 3-day access to it by clicking the link in the description below. But first impressions, as you know, they're crucial. Everybody judges everybody. Now, if you don't believe that, definitely take the course. If you're gonna say, well, I don't judge people, you judge. There's an excellent book by Malcolm Gladwell. It's called Blink. If you haven't read it, check it out. And it explains how we judge people all day long subconsciously. We don't even realize it. And it comes from all different places, right? Well, our childhood, our social interactions, things we see on the news, things that we hear from our friends, our family, all these things combined create all these judgments in our subconscious, and we'll quickly judge somebody. The first time we see them, the first time we speak to them, the first time we get a WhatsApp from them, an email, the first time we see your website, anything. So now what's important to keep in mind about first impressions is that, let's say hypothetically you don't give off the best first impression on your phone call, okay, with a customer. Let's say we're talking about sales. You can actually make it up in your email. You can write a really good email, not too long, very catchy, and you can change their mind about the first impression they've already made of you. First impressions are actually really interesting. A lot of people think it only happens once, the first time they speak to you, the first time they hear from you. It's actually something that's accumulated over several different interactions with you. So this is actually a benefit to you, because as human beings, we're gonna mess up sometimes, and that's okay. But we do have a chance to actually make it up as we go through the other types of contacts that we're gonna make with that person. Number 4, work the numbers. In order to be able to persuade anybody, you have to actually get in front of enough people. So in a business setting or in sales, I see a lot of salespeople and entrepreneurs making the mistake of not scheduling enough meetings and not meeting with enough prospective clients. So obviously, if you're not meeting with enough people, you're not going to be able to drive enough potential customers down your funnel, which means that your sales are actually going to be lower than you want them to be. So the general rule for how many people you want to get in front of is going to be 9 times your goal. So for example, if your goal is to have 5 new clients by the end of this month, then you would want to contact 45 potential clients. And that is very simply due to the fact that 33% of anything is going to happen statistically. That you don't have to be amazingly fantastic in your sales pitch. You don't have to be super skilled in anything. A beginner salesperson knowing very, very little about your company can achieve these numbers. That's interesting, right? So the whole concept of should I work harder, should I work smarter? This is simply a matter of working harder. You don't have to be super amazing at everything you do. You just have to put in a little bit more effort in the beginning, and the numbers will make up for your lack of skill if you're not at that level yet. 9 times whatever your target is, reach out to that many people, and you will eventually end up with 5 clients. Number 5, follow-up. Follow-up is actually the most important process in the persuasion cycle. And interestingly enough, most people do not put enough effort or emphasis on the follow-up. And most people actually do it in a very, very boring way, and they don't do it enough. I have a full course on follow-up as well, because it's such a crucial element of the process. But very simply, you have to follow up at least 8 times with anybody to get your point across or to get your sale made. And this is statistically. Now I want you to think about something. If your reaction was like, oh, 8 times, that's a lot. I mean, yeah, it seems like a lot, right? But think about it. So if you're in business, in sales, the last client that you signed, the last customer that you got, How many times did you have to follow up with them before you got that sale? Drop that number in the comments below. I want you to think about this, okay? So we're talking about follow-up. So after the first time you spoke to them, or an email or whatever it was, how many other contacts did you make with that customer? Email, phone, WhatsApp. Maybe they said yes, and then you had to remind them to sign the contract, to sign the application. Maybe they said, okay, tomorrow, and then you had to send them another WhatsApp. All of these are follow-ups. How many follow-ups did it take you to sign the last client that you had? On a personal level, think about the last time you persuaded your children to do anything. Let's say you persuaded them to turn off the iPad. How many times did you have to ask them before they turned it off? Now, okay, with kids, it depends, highly depends on the time of day and whether they're focused or, their mood and all kinds of things. But think about how many times it usually takes you to ask them to do something before they do it. Put that number in the comments below. Is it more than 8? Now, if it's more than 8 with kids, I know your blood just starts boiling, right? But in a business setting, you can actually follow up 8 times and be interesting. That's all in my course. Number 6. Mental stability. This is absolutely crucial if you're trying to persuade anybody for anything. Why? Because once you really start to understand that it's going to take time, you have to contact a lot more people than you're going to get through to, and you have to follow up for a really long time in a lot of cases, then you'll start to realize that you're not necessarily going to get results the first time around. Now, sometimes miracles happen and the kids will listen to you first time. Your husband or wife will say, yeah, that's a great idea the first time you give them the idea. The client will say, yes, I definitely want to get started, send me the contract the first time you speak to them. Do these things happen? Yes. Is it normal? No, it's not normal. So when it does happen, be happy, get it done, cool. But don't expect that. And that's where your mental stability comes in. You have to realize that getting anything done or persuading anybody is going to take time. And once you really start to understand that, that's going to help your mental clarity and your focus. Because this, besides being a very soothing type of hand movement, is also life and business and sales and everything, right? So if we deal with this all the time in persuasion, where sometimes we're doing great and sometimes nobody's listening and sometimes we're getting a good response and then sometimes things are horrible, but we understand that when things are here, it eventually will come back here, then we can stay right here because that's where we need to be and that's where you have to stay all the time. So mental stability is absolutely key in persuasion. Now, I hope this video was helpful on how to be good at sales, how to persuade people on your ideas. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like it, hit the thumbs down twice. It won't hurt my feelings. I'll see you in the next video and make sure you subscribe.